Maseches Megillah Daf Yod Tes contains two Mishnayos. We'll begin with the first one, which introduces two independent machloksin. One is about what happens when somebody moves from a town in which they land the Megillah on the 14th to a town in which they land on the 15th, or vice versa. Where does his obligation fall? Second machlokis is about how much of the Megillah you have to read to fulfill the mitzvah. The Gemara will explain the sources for both of these machloksin. And we'll get to the next Mishnah, which discusses who is allowed to read the Megillah and be multi others. Specifically, we'll talk about a child, a cheresh, or a shoteh. Terms we'll discuss then, and the Gemara will try to establish who the author of that Mishnah is. So let's begin. Mishnah says there are two discussions here. The first one is what happens if somebody is from a town with a walled city, goes to an unwalled city, goes to an open city, or vice versa. Somebody in a open city goes to a walled city. Where does he have to read the Megillah? So the Mishnah just says that even if he has, the Mishnah just rules that if he intends to go back, then he has the halacha of the place that he came from, that he's going back to. And if he tends to stay, then he has the halacha of the place where he is. The Gemara will define that more specifically. Next, the Mishnah discusses what is the halacha, from where do you have to start reading the Megillah? Do you have to read the whole thing or only part of it? So this Mishnah brings three opinions. Rav Meir says you have to read the entire Megillah. Rav Yehuda says from Ish Yehudi, from when it introduces Mordechai, and Rav Yossi says from Machar Dvarim Ma'ela, from when it introduces Haman by name. Okay, so let's go to the Gemara. The Gemara first of all says, what do we mean when you say that you are going to go back? You're going to go back after Purim? You have to read the Megillah like the people in your previous town? How does this work exactly? So Gemara says it goes by where you will be for the beginning of the day of Purim, for dawn on Purim day, and by Purim day we mean in the town where you are. Where you will you be there on the Purim of that town itself? Do you intend to go back before Purim in the place where you are? Or do you intend to stay there through at least part of the day of Purim itself? So let's go through it. So if you're somebody who came from a place where they land on the 14th, or let's do the other way. You came from a place where you land on the 15th, and now you're in a place where you're on the 14th, where they land on the 14th, and you are there. Purim night, you're there. Do you have to land Purim night? So it depends. If you plan to be there for any part of the day to come, which is Purim itself, that means you're going to be there on the day of Purim, then you are obligated in reading Megillah like the place you are in. Because the fact that you'll be there for a couple of moments of daylight, that's from crack at dawn, gives you the obligation to read where you are on the 14th. And therefore, Purim night you also have to read, and of course you have to read the Megillah on the day of Purim as well. Now, the opposite is also true. If you're somebody who comes from a town where they land on the 14th, and you're found in a place where they land on the 15th, so if you intend to be there through the 15th, through part of the day, past the crack of dawn on the 15th, then your obligation is on the 15th. You do not have to read on the 14th. You only have to read on the 15th. If, however, you intend to go back before the 15th dawns, your obligation is not on the 15th, and you must read on the 14th, even though you're now found in a town where they're reading on the 15th, because you're going to have to keep those halachas. Okay. That's how the Gemara explains it. Now the Gemara says, what is the source of this halacha? How do we know that if you're in a place where their obligation hits for part of the day, you also get that obligation? So the Gemara says, because we have a repetitious language discussing the halacha of the Orei HaProzim. And it says as follows. Al-Kain ha-Yehudim ha-Prozim Hayoshvim be'orei haprozos. The Jews who are spread out, that live in the cities of the spread out. So that's repetitious. What do you need that for? So Gemara says, that's telling me that even if you don't live, if you're not a prozi, you're not a person who is always in a spread out town, but you're spending the day or part of the day in a spread out town, you are living in the spread out town, meaning a town without a wall, then you also get that obligation just like the rest of the people in the spread out town. So Gemara says, okay, that's good for those who are coming from the 15th town to a 14th town. What about the other way? Gemara says, no, it's logical. If it goes this way, it goes the other way as well. And now the Gemara adds a couple of halachas here. The Gemara says that Rava says that somebody who comes from a small village and he landed before Yudalid, let's say he landed in Yudalef, and he finds himself in Yudalid in a big city where they're landing on the 4th day. Does he have to read now or not? So Rava says yes. The only reason he was able to read earlier was because the Rabbanan made it easier for him not to have to travel to the big city as a reward for the fact that he supplies food and water. But if he's already in the big city on the day of the 14th, then there is no leniency that he won't have to travel, and therefore he does have to hear the Megillah. Now, Abaye had a kasha from a Mishnah which seems to have a mistake. So the Mishnah says as follows: somebody who goes from a walled city to an open city always has to read like his original place. So Abaye says this can't be right, because it can't be that somebody goes from a walled city always has to read like his original place. It's not true. It depends when he's going back. So it must mean somebody who goes from a village to an unwalled city always has to read like his original place, meaning to say that he's already yotze with what he read earlier and he doesn't have to read again. So Rava is not impressed with this. Rava says, well, you have to change the text of this Mishnah or Brisa anyway because you said that there's a mistake, so just change it further. Say that he doesn't have to read like his original place. Say that the halacha is that if he travels from a village to an open, unwalled city, he always has to read like they are reading there, which is what I told you the halacha is. Now the Gemara goes into the second machlokes of the Mishnah, which is from where do you have to read. So we've already seen three opinions. The Gemara has a price which goes to fourth opinion. Rishon by Achai, he says you start from Balaylahu, start from when Achashverosh couldn't sleep and the actual miracle began. So Gemara says, what is the source of these four opinions? So Gemara gives two psukim that may be the source. Each of them could be the source of all four. So the first one is the pasuk says Vatichtov Esar Malko Mordechai Yehudi is called Tokef. They wrote down, meaning they created this Megillah, which writes all the strength, all the force, all the power. So Gemara says, what does it refer to by all the power? So the one that says you need to read the entire Megillah says it refers to the power of Achashverosh. You have to go all the way back to the beginning of the story where it talks about Achashverosh and how he rose to power and what he did. The one that says you start from Ish Yehudi says it refers to the power of Mordechai. That's when he's introduced. The one that says you start from Achar Dvar Ma'ela it says it's referring to the power of Haman. And the one that says you start from Balaylahu, when Achashverosh couldn't sleep, that's when the nace actually begins the miracle. It's talking about the power of the miracle. Now, the other explanation is it's from the pasuk Umaro Kachol Ma'agia Aleihim. So that means, what was the reason that this Megillah was written? Maro, what did they see? Al-Kacha on what? And what happened as a result? So what is it referring to when we say that this Megillah was written to explain what they saw, what they did, and what the result was? So according to the opinion, it says you have to read the entire thing. It's what did Achashverosh see that he decided to use the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash? He saw that the 70 years had passed according to his calculation that the Jews would be redeemed and they weren't. And what ended up happening was that he killed Vashti. Now the opinion that says that you start from Ish Yehudi says, what did Mordechai see? That he started up with Haman. What he saw was that Haman made himself into an Avodah Zarah and made people bow down to him. What ended up happening was the miracle. The one that says you start from Achar Dvarim Ba'ela, which is when Haman is introduced, said, what did Haman see? That he started up with the Jews. He saw that Mordechai refused to bow. They refused to kneel, and what ended up happening was that he and his sons ended up hanging on a tree. And the one who says you start from Balaylahu, when the Achashverosh couldn't sleep, says, what did Achashverosh see? That he brought the book of Chronicles to be read before him. He saw that Esther invited Mordechai to the party. Esther invited Haman, that is, to the party, and he was wondering what that was. Like we said earlier, in the last parak, he was afraid there was a plot against him, and nobody had informed him because he did not pay back previously people who had helped him. What ended up happening was a miracle. Okay, what's the halacha? Says the Gemara of Chelbo, since the name of Chaim Bar Gira, the name of Rav, the halacha is you have to read the entire Megillah. Now, according to the one that says you only have to start from Ish Yehudi, you do have to have an entire Megillah written out in front of you. You just don't have to read the whole thing. Now, the same person of Chelbo, in the name of Chaim Bar Gira, the name of Rav, says that a Megillah is referred to as both a sefer and it's referred to as an igeris. It's referred to as a book, as a scroll, and it's referred to as the letter. That means it has some halachas of a Sefer Torah, but not all the halachas of a Sefer Torah. It has the halachas of a Sefer Torah that the separate sections have to be sewn together with animal gidin, with sinews, not with flax thread. If you do that, it's puzzle. But it does not have the halacha of a Sefer Torah that you do not have to sew the entire length of the seam between the sections. You could just make 3 stitches. As Rav Nachman says, but the 3 stitches have to be equally spaced between them and from the stitches to the edge. Now, the Gemara has another halacha here. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, somebody who reads the Megillah has to be just one scroll containing only the Megillah. It cannot contain other Sfarim in it as well, written on the same long scroll. The Rava says there is a way that is permitted, and that's if the Megillah part is longer or shorter than the rest of the scroll, because that shows that it is separate. So the problem is that if it's part of one long scroll, it doesn't show the significance of it. It doesn't show that you're proclaiming the miracle. It just seems to show that you're learning, you're reading from Ksuvim. Now, if you have it longer or shorter, then that will be significant. So now the Gemara says that a couple of incidents happened here. That Levi Bar Shmuel was reading the Megillah before of Yehuda, and he was reading from a scroll that had the Megillah plus other things in it, and he told him, you're not Yaitzu with that. Separately, Rav Chibar Abbas and Rav Yochanan, that you're not Yaitzu with that, but then he limited it, and he said that that's only if you're reading in public. If you're reading privately, then you are Yaitzu with that. Rav Chibar Abbas also said in the name of Rav Yochanan that the halacha is in a Sefer Torah, we know that you have to leave a little bit of space from the threading between the sections to the edge. You shouldn't thread it all the way to it. You shouldn't sew it down. You shouldn't sew the connection all the way to the edge. You should leave a bit of space on either end that's not sewn. So he first said that the reason is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and then he limited that. He said, no, it's not halacha l'Moshe Sinai, it's really midrabanan, and the reason is that it shouldn't tear. If it's sewn all the way to the edge, if somebody rolls the Torah too tightly, it'll rip out the threads. Like this, it'll spread, and then you'll see, and you'll loosen the wrapping. Another thing from the Rabbi named Rabbi Yochanan says that when Moshe stood on Har Sinai and he stood in a cave and HaKadosh Baruch Hu covered him as he passed, Eliyahu had the same experience. Both of them, if a tiny hole the size of the eye of a sewing needle had been left uncovered, neither of them would have been able to survive because of the light, as it were, not actual light, but because of the energy coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu as he passed. Like it says, Lo Yiradi Adam V'Chay, a person cannot see me and survive. And the final thing of Rav Chiya bar Abba named Rav Yochanan, when it says, Aleihem kechol hadvar ma'asher dibar Hashem imochem. That's a pasuk in Devarim discussing what Moshe received on Har Sinai. So what he received is the specifics of the Torah, every S, every kam, every extra letter, what it includes or excludes, every ach, every rak, what it excludes. All the specific things that Chachamim in the future will be able to figure out from the specifics, and what they are going to add. And what they're going to add refers to Megillah, the reading of the Megillah. Okay, now we begin the next Mishnah, which simply discusses who is allowed to read the Megillah. So it seems to present a machlokes. First it says that anybody except a cheresh, a shota, or a katan. Cheresh is a person who cannot hear, a deaf person. Obviously here we're referring to someone who could speak. He couldn't hear his own speaking though. A shota is someone who is not functional, he's not sane, and therefore he's not obligated in mitzvos. And a katan, a child, is also not obligated in mitzvos min daraisa. Even though the mitzvah of Megillah is a derabanan, but a child is only obligated in it as a derabanan of a derabanan, therefore he cannot read it and fulfill the mitzvah for others by hearing him. Now, the Gemara is going to assume that Cheresh here is different than the other two. The other two are not obligated in mitzvos, and therefore there's under no circumstances can they fulfill the mitzvah, or could you fulfill the mitzvah from hearing them. Cheresh, though, the only problem is that he can't hear what he's reading. And therefore it's dependent on the halacha of, is a person yotza a mitzvah if he cannot hear if it's a speaking mitzvah, is he yotza if there's no sound that he's hearing. The Gemara is going to assume it's the same as if he doesn't say it at all. And the question therefore will be, can you be yotza a mitzvah that you're supposed to say if either you don't hear it, or you say it too quietly to hear, or if you just read the words with your eyes and you don't actually speak it out? So the Gemara wants to say that the author of this Mishnah that says that a cheresh can't be yotza does not fit with Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds is that you don't have to hear what you say. You don't have to hear any speaking thing. The Gemara is going to have a couple of different cases where we'll bring in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and a couple of different ways we'll try to show that Rabbi Yehuda cannot fit into this Mishnah. So the first thing the Gemara says is there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in a Mishnah Brachos about somebody who says Shema, but he doesn't hear it, so it counts as if he didn't say it. So what is the halacha there? So there are three possible outcomes in all of these discussions. There are three possible halachos. One is that you're yotza l'chavchila, you can do it that way, no problem. A level below that is that you're not supposed to do it that way, but if you did, you do fulfill the mitzvah. That's called b'diavad. And the third approach is that you're not yotza even b'diavad. So again, lechatchila b'diavad and not even b'diavad. So Gemara quotes this Mishnah, and it says as follows: somebody reads Shema and he doesn't hear it. So he basically says you're not yotza. That implies not even diavad. That's the third level. And the other opinion, which isn't spelled out here, but it's Rabbi Yehuda, he says you are yotza. The Gemara is assuming that means that you're yotza b'diavad, and you're not supposed to do it lechatchila. So Gemara says that doesn't fit with our Mishnah over here, which says that a cheresh cannot fulfill the mitzvah for you. He cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda there says you are yotza b'diavad, and here the Mishnah seems to say that you're not yotza with a cheresh, with a deaf person, because he doesn't hear it, and the Gemara assumes that means even b'diavad. So the Gemara right away asks, how do you know that here it says you're not yotza even b'diavad? Maybe it just means that you're not supposed to do it that way l'chatchila, but the middle level b'diavad you are yotza, and therefore fits perfectly with Rabbi Yehuda over there. So Gemara says no, shouldn't be, because our Mishnah puts cheresh together with shota and katan, and just like a shota and katan, you don't fulfill the mitzvah at all because they're not obligated in the mitzvah. Cheresh should also be you're not fulfilling the mitzvah at all. That way, it all fits together nicely. So Gemara is not impressed by that. The Gemara says no, maybe cheresh you're not yotza lechatchila only b'diavad, and shota v'katan you are yotza b'diavad. Shota v'katan you're not yotza even b'diavad, and it does fit with Rabbi Yehuda. So Gemara says, okay, I'll show you a different way that this can't be Rabbi Yehuda, and that's simply because in the end Rabbi Yehuda argues. End of this Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says a katan is kosher to read the Megillah. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda can't be the Tanna Kama. He doesn't agree with the Tanna Kama. Tanna Kama says a katan is not yotza, cannot be motza you, and Rabbi Yehuda says he can. Where it says no, not necessarily. It could really be that it's all Rabbi Yehuda, and the first part of the Mishnah is talking about a different type of katan than the later part of the Mishnah. First type of the Mishnah is talking about a katan who's not even at the age of education. He's too young to even be obligated midrabanan in Megillah. And at the end it says that if he is Gila Chinuch, if he is old enough to start learning, to start practicing, doing the mitzvahs, then Rabbi Yehuda says he's kosher, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that a katan is kosher. So therefore it could still be Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara therefore says, I'm going to change your understanding of Rabbi Yehuda by Shema. Rabbi Yehuda actually holds in this entire discussion of someone who does a speaking mitzvah without hearing it or without speaking it, he holds that you are yotza lechatchila. And therefore the opinions in that are Rabbi Yehuda says that you're yotza lechatchila, highest level. You can do it lechatchila that way. And Rabbi Yossi says you're not yotza even b'diavad. That way, this Mishnah here, which says that a cheresh, shota, and a katan are not kosher, the best that could mean is that it's not lechatchila, it's only b'diavad. It still can fit with Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that it is lechatchila. Now, why would I say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're allowed to do it without hearing even the lechatchila? This is because there is such an opinion. There's an Amar who said that Shimon ben Pazi, he says that a cheresh who speaks and cannot be heard is allowed to take truma and say the bracha, and he's allowed to do it lechatchila. Now, according to the way we set it up before, that Rabbi Yehuda holds it's b'diavad, so this Rav Shimon doesn't fit with anybody, because it doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda who says b'diavad, it doesn't fit with Rabbi Yossi who says not even b'diavad. So you have to change your understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, and he says really you can do it lechatchila. And Rav Shimon also therefore fits with him, and he says you can do it lechatchila. And therefore, we're back to our understanding that this Mishnah about the cheresh, shota, and the katan, reading the Megillah, can't be Rabbi Yehuda, because the Mishnah says it's b'diavad, and Rabbi Yehuda says it could even be lechatchila. So the Gemara says, not so fast, because there's another brisa which says that in the same similar type of case, somebody who says Berachos Hamazon, but he doesn't speak it out, he just says it in his heart, as it were, he says that you're yotza b'diavad. So who's that going to be? According to the way you set it up now, it's not Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi, so you're running into the same issue over there. So Gemara says, okay, so I'll tell you that there's two opinions here. There's Rabbi Yehuda's own opinion, and there's Rabbi Yehuda's understanding of his Rebbe's opinion. That is, we're introducing another opinion, and that's that of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Rebbe of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that it is b'diavad. And therefore you have all three opinions. Now, we see these three opinions in a Mishnah discussing Shema, and over there, Rabbi Yehuda says that you're yotze if you say Shema and you don't hear it, b'diavad, and that can't be his own opinion, because we were claiming now that he holds the chatchila, so therefore that has to be him in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, which is what it says there, but he does not agree to it. And over there you have Rabbi Meir who says that it's even lechatchila. So Gemara says, hold on a second. Once you told me that, so you don't have to come onto this whole changing of everything. I have three opinions without that. Rabbi Yehuda agrees to his Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah that if you don't hear what you're saying, you're Yotze b'diavad. Rabbi Meir holds lechatchila, and Rabbi Yossi holds not Yotze at all. And that way you have all three opinions. And now Rav Shimon ben Pazi fits very nicely. He's like Rabbi Meir holds lechatchila. If I don't have to change Rabbi Yehuda, and we're back to not having any reason to say that our mission doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda, which is that you're Yotze b'diavad and not lechatchila.